Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Haltman, and welcome to the Do You Ever Wonder LinkedIn Live, brought to you by Hallmark Abstract Service. I am the CEO of Hallmark Abstract Service, and I couldn't be more excited tonight because we have a very special guest, Rob Cooper-Smith, a managing director with Cushman Wakefield. And the reason it's so exciting is based on some of the new things that have come out this week, courtesy of Mayor Bill de Blasio, courtesy of Governor Cuomo. And so the purpose of tonight's episode is really to go over the state of the commercial real estate market. New York City's commercial real estate market, the tri-state area's commercial real estate market, and commercial real estate encompasses many different things. And before we talk to Rob, I would just like to review some of the things that have gone on. So it was like a sledgehammer to the commercial real estate market. And so let me just go over some of the things that I see as key factors impacting the market. And before I do that, so May 17th, the subways are going to open 24/7. According to Governor Cuomo, on May 19th, New York opens 100%. July 1st, according to Mayor Bill de Blasio, New York City opens 100%. What that exactly means is unclear. I think restaurants will have indoor seating, but will still have the 6 feet social distancing. I don't know how much, that's going to change things from the way that they are now. But some of the factors that I see that I'd like to speak to Rob about and get his thoughts. Work at home. Will the office worker come back? COVID was great for people. They didn't have to commute on the Long Island Railroad. They didn't go to their offices. Surveys have been done in terms of 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week. Exactly how much will people come in? The amount of space, office space, that's available for lease and sublease is somewhat of an unknown, but the numbers are, from what I've read, fairly large. Tech companies have been huge takers of office space. The big FANG stocks have been acquiring office space, while some of the smaller tech companies have been losing office space. We all walk around Manhattan, we see storefronts for rent. Will the stores come back? Restaurants, are they gone or just in critical condition and they'll come back? The enhanced government support. People are making more sometimes being on unemployment than they are working. Can some of these businesses get the personnel that they need? I know I hear restaurant owners who say that they really can't get the workers that they need. Unpaid rent and eviction moratoriums. What is that going to look like going forward? Rent discovery. What are people going to be willing to pay, whether it's for retail, office, and apartments? How will the value of buildings be determined when net operating income may not be 100% ascertainable right now because we don't really know what those rents are? And finally, in my mind, are tourists going to come surging back to the city? So all of that said, Rob Cooper-Smith, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. I can't think of a more timely subject than what's going on with commercial real estate.
Thank you for having me, Michael. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So what do you, we can go sector by sector. And, I know that New York City is going to be very different than Connecticut, very different than New Jersey. Why don't we start with, where would you like to start? If we were going to look at different sectors.
Sure. You asked a lot of different questions and a lot of different things there. I think that the first and foremost and most important thing is, my answer at least, is yes, we are coming back. And it's just a matter of how we come back. I think you're going to see a change in the environment. I think a lot of these companies realize that the work from home truly works. No pun intended with that. But, it's giving people a better way of working. And in each part of the country, each part of the world, everybody works a little bit differently. I think, you look at New York City as that hub, and you have talent is attracted to New York City, but it's being brought from all over from Connecticut, Westchester, New Jersey, Queens, Brooklyn. Everybody's coming there. We look at Long Island City. We look at all these places that kind of flourished over the past few years. But I think you're going to see, number one, obviously between the vaccination, the warm weather, all that stuff coming here now. I think everyone's kind of saying by the end of summer is when we're going to see everybody back. Some of the larger companies that I've spoken to, some of them are talking about anywhere between 2 and 4 days back in the office. So they're going to alter their schedules. You touched on space, square footage, right? That's an important component here as well. I think you're going to see a general decrease in overall footprints. And I think when this all started, we thought it was going to be a massive number. I think now, and just the conversations we hear, it's probably going to be these companies taking probably about 10% less than they were taking before.
Now, if they're currently in a long-term lease and they want to cut their space by 10%, are landlords, in your opinion, going to be flexible, going to work with the tenants, or be more rigid and say, you know what, if you want to buy out of this lease, it's going to cost you X?
So the answer is it's a case-by-case basis, right? And different companies that we've been working with currently, both in the suburbs and in the city, there's certain things that we look at, whether there's a termination right in a few years from now and how we can work that into the deal. If depending on the contiguous tenants surrounding the maybe the floor plate, and see if they need more space, they need less space, if it creates, so it's
because there are companies who are just going to pick up and leave, I imagine. There are other ones who are going to negotiate in good faith. And then, now, like you said, on a case-by-case basis, it's a give and take between the parties. So, how different landlords, how do you envision, the majority are going to be with their tenants?
I think if you have a major corporation on the lease as a landlord, if you and I own the building and we have IBM on, whoever it might be on the lease, we know that's going to be rent that's going to come in. As the landlords, we still need to pay the bills, right? We have real estate taxes, we have operating expenses, we have heavier operating expenses now because maybe we're cleaning the building more often. There's certain things that we're providing in order to continue to maintain the services in a building. So it really still goes back. It's a case-by-case basis of what's going on. And the buildings are all breathing animals, is what I like to say. And if somebody else needs a little bit more space, the landlord's going to be a little bit more lenient to possibly give it up.
Right.
A lot of sublease space on the market right now. But people are still, I like to use the word from a football terminology, they're punting, right? So they're asking for those 1-year extensions. And then we've already come to where, 6-8 months ago, they asked for the 1 year. They need another year now because they're still unsure.
Right.
But I think people are going to get more and more comfortable. And the other key word that I love using is collaboration. And if we don't collaborate together, sure, the Teams, the Zoom, all that works well. And then, I'll just touch on another piece on that. I talked to some other people that they find it to be more productive working in electronic Teams, Zoom type of thing, because they say if they're at a meeting and they really don't have to be present, but they were invited and want to be there, they could be doing something else on the other screen, but listening in, and it's not as apparent that they're working.
Right.
And they're hitting that many more meetings because we hang up, we go to the next one. It's not walking to another building or getting in a taxi or whatever it might be. So,
no question. I mean, I know that from the perspective of every business, if you can set up a Zoom call versus traveling an hour and a half in your car just to get to that meeting, I think it's definitely going to be a win-win. But as you said, I think people are very comfortable, with the handshake. It's like in networking. I always used to say networking is a contact sport. Business is somewhat of a contact sport. And I think people are getting a little more comfortable with the contact. So New York City is a conglomeration of many different areas, whether it's, Battery Park to the Upper East Side. And each one entails, like if I'm a commuter coming into Penn Station, the ability to not have to take the subway as the second part of my trip is very attractive. So do you think certain areas of the city are going to be much more attractive than other areas of the city in terms of attracting new tenants?
That answer was always the old of Penn Station area, Grand Central, that was always, that's where people wanted to be. And so I'm not even prepared to comment on that yet, because I don't think we're far along enough to know that answer. I think everybody's got very comfortable sitting in their house, waking up, doing their workout now. I mean, if you think about it, for the majority of people, it's a minimum of a 2-hour commute coming from the burbs to Manhattan. So, a lot of time for people to have, and I think they've gotten very comfortable with it.
Well, I know somebody who has a business in the city, a good business, a lot of employees, and he's leaving his space and he's going to use his office on Long Island. And somebody said, how's life? And he said, exponentially better. I mean, when I commute on the Long Island Railroad, you look around and there aren't a lot of happy faces. So I think enticing people to come back, although a lot of people don't have any choice. If the company says come back, what choices do you have? So as you said, it's definitely a work in progress, and it's definitely going to be very interesting to see what goes on. But, that's office space. For anyone who's walked around Manhattan or any of New York City or even the suburbs, vacant storefronts have become a basic part of the landscape. How easy do you think it's going to be to refill those stores?
So what's interesting is, if we talk on the big box side in the suburbs, we're seeing a lot of conversations now about it being converted to industrial space, right? The Amazons and the Walmarts and all those, they're just taking over, and not necessarily, from the delivery standpoint. And the ability to just buy and have it delivered, it just adds to people don't want to go out. So that conversion, but then you talk about the smaller shops, and forgetting that Amazon's putting them all out of business. But I personally think some of these restaurants did an incredible job of surviving during this time. It's just touching and just truly amazing. And listen, I wasn't involved in that in owning a restaurant, so I could imagine how difficult it was. But even when you drive through the streets of Manhattan now and see those wood things they built for each place, it's amazing. And the fact that life will go on here.
No question. I think, I don't often give New York City leadership a lot of props, but I think that the way they pivoted to those outdoor spaces and made them an option, basically a lifeline for restaurants was great. They recognized an issue and they addressed it in a practical way, which is a great thing.
And the streets are buzzing. I mean, I don't, I was downtown last week and you wouldn't almost feel it or see it. The streets are happening. And then you go up in one of the towers or one of the high rises, and there's nobody in the space. It's incredible. If it's 5% occupied in some of these spaces, it's crazy. The companies are going to have the quandary of, can you mandate that people come back? I think some companies can mandate that. I think others, that again is going to be a work in progress. But then, there are parts of the city that around the theater district, they say theaters won't open until September. What will that do to the area? Times Square and I think that as travel, everything's coming back slowly, right? And we're seeing little by little, people are getting on airplanes again, and the travel it's up. So I think the answer is New York's going to be New York, and people are going to come back, and it's just going to take us some time.
Right.
It's a new way, right? I mean, just wearing masks everywhere it's different.
There's no doubt this has been a surreal experience of. I remember back to the beginning of the pandemic, and I didn't necessarily feel like I wanted to wear a mask into a store. And it has become just our way of life, of doing things. So, as much as we've swung in one direction, we need to start to swing in the other direction. But it's definitely going to be a work in progress and take some time. But, the question then comes in is, do a lot of these landlords, store owners, do they have that time? They had the PPP loan, they had the second PPP loan. How much time does a landlord have? How much time does his mortgage holder give him? Everyone, as we discussed before, it's not you have to feel for the tenants, but at the same time, you have to feel for the landlords who have taxes to pay, utilities to pay, maintenance staff to pay. So, how long do people have?
Again, I hate to say case by case, but at the end of the day, it's dependent on the building. One other thing we didn't touch on that's going to be big is medical conversion as well, right? All these hospitals are needing more space, so that's going to be a big player in some of maybe the office space that now becomes medical. How long do these landlords have? They're trying to all figure it out. Right. But slowly and surely, the collaboration thing, anybody who works in an office with multiple people know what collaboration is, and it just drives business. And I said I was in an office the other day, and I saw it must have been 6 or 7 people right out of college who probably started during the pandemic, and I just patted them all. I didn't pat them on the back, but I kind of went over to them, and that camaraderie and it just, the energy level was really good to see. I don't know if it's because I've been out of the office so long, and it was just so great to see, but it gave me a good feeling of like, let's go.
Right. Well, and you're talking about at Cushman.
No. This was another
office.
Yeah.
Well, I talk to my kids who are, 31, 28. And, the reality is that when a new employee starts, you can't be by yourself in a living room. There's a lot of help that a new employee needs, and they're not getting it by not being in the office. So it's definitely going to be interesting. And just to be clear, I know that I'm asking you many questions that are huge questions that I don't really expect you to give me an answer. So, for all of our listeners out there, I mean, they're just huge questions that, that nobody really knows the answer to, and we'll develop those answers, but, it's definitely going to take time. So
I think the business owners and the decision makers who are trying to figure out, what do we do with our leases? Do we go buy a building? Do we sell our building? I think, unfortunately, it is a case-by-case business situation. I mean, we have within Cushman Wakefield have a group called Workplace Strategies, and they have played a major role right now throughout this process of figuring out how is space usage going to change, right? So you talk about, we went to this hoteling, they called it a few years ago, and you'd come in and you'd sit down in your space, and that was your space for the day. But now people are hesitant that they don't want to share space, even though it's been cleaned. They want their own space.
Right.
So every company is different based on what they do, how they do it, how much space, are there meetings going on. But go ahead.
No. Well, that's interesting, because I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, the WeWork model was being pointed to as a huge solution, because at the time it was like, companies aren't going to need space. They're going to need some space, but they're not going to need the same amount of space. So the WeWork model seemed like a logical model. But as you're saying, people don't necessarily want to share a space with people they don't know, because now everyone wants hygienic space.
And there's 2 layers to that, right? So the first layer is, okay, I'm using a desk that maybe my friend from work was at the day before. But now, like in the WeWork situation, right? So you look at these companies and they're trying to control the environment, if you will. And they're taking temperatures, or each company has different protocols. Some do testing once a week or whatever. But when you get into the WeWork situation, it's multiple companies, right? So it's every man for themselves. So that adds that other layer.
So do you envision that co-working space will be a panacea for companies, or from what we just discussed, possibly it will not, and those co-working spaces will have trouble? I mean, WeWork already has trouble, but
I think that comes back eventually, because that WeWork created that collaboration I was talking before, and the attorneys talking to the accountant. It just was a really great synergy.
I used to go to WeWork to meet with people, and it's phenomenal. I mean, you would have happy hours at the end of the day. You would have people congregating in the kitchen. It was for small companies, especially, a great way to like develop a day-to-day networking cycle, which was great. But yeah, no, well, we shall see. And they always had great food in the coffee place. But so looking at multifamily, I know that one of my kids moved out of the city at the beginning of COVID. Another one of my kids swapped a studio for a one bedroom at the same price. In your, were the deals gotten at the beginning? Are there still deals now? How are landlords going to persevere through all of this? How do you kind of see that marketplace?
So I think that you're going to see that reset again, if you will. I think the deals that people were getting for a period of time are going to start resetting. I think that's the best word to use. Typically in the residential world, you're not signing long-term leases, right? It's 1, maybe 2 years. Once in a while, you'll see a 3-year lease. And that'll allow the market to play itself out and the landlords figure out how they're going to handle things.
Right. So now, I'd asked you, earlier in the day, just a question. So I had at one point owned a commercial mortgage lending company, small balance. And, I know the mechanics that go into loans, net operating income minus expenses. You come up with a debt service coverage ratio, and that determines whether a lender will or will not lend. If some of these multifamilies either have vacancies or maybe are still have rent discovery in terms of what their rent roll is going to look like, do you possibly envision, and again, this is a question that you may or may not be able to answer, but do you envision that buildings looking to refinance a mortgage, or a current owner who doesn't have a mortgage on his building and goes to his or her building and goes to cash out of that building, do you envision, until there's some kind of rent discovery, is that going to be a problem, do you think?
I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because and we could talk, I could talk for hours about this, but a lot of these people right now with 1031 money are just looking to just get whatever they can get because of the exchanges. And we don't know where those laws are going to change over the next couple months. So I think that multifamily is, and industrial, probably the strongest two layers of the real estate world that are super hot right now. And I predict that the multifamily stuff, whether it's locally or nationally, I have some friends who were telling me about some properties they were looking out in Arizona. Everything is, the residential market is just on fire.
Right.
It's incredible.
No doubt. And so speaking of residential and coming back into the boroughs of Manhattan, even though we're looking more to the tri-state, but I've heard talk about the fact that hotels, which is a little more logical, but some office buildings may be converted to housing, maybe affordable housing. Do you envision that actually is possible, between the zoning and between, reconfiguring an office building into something that someone could actually live in? Do you see that as being possible?
I think it's being evaluated, right? And each building's different, how the floor plates work. Another element of that is self-storage, how some of these hotels can be converted to that. But I think that was kind of 6-8 months ago. And now I think everyone's seeing, and it's just, I'm hoping that things come back and the travel world is going to be hot again,
right,
as things start to reopen.
So now, typically, and I'm not going to say that this is what it was in 2008, but typically when there's a crisis, when there's a decline in value, and I'm not saying that there has been a decline in value, at least in Manhattan and the tri-state area, but the smart money will typically congregate to take advantage of that. And in your position at Cushman and Wakefield, have you become aware of smart money, REITs, or, just multiple investors pooling, $100 million, $300 million? Are you aware of that kind of activity going on, or is it still too soon?
Too soon. However, I will say that the offerings on some of these buildings is mind-boggling to me. I mean, what some people are coming in at to just come in and wrap their hands around it. Not necessarily in the retail world, but more so on the multifamily and industrial world.
You mean the buyers?
That's right.
That they're coming in and lowballing, or they're willing to pay?
I don't want to say highballing. They're paying top numbers for properties that were not worth what they're offering at this point.
Really? That's interesting.
And I think market by market is different, but I'm kind of talking locally.
Right. Well, that's very interesting. Why? So you don't see that some people are coming in and paying what people were paying or more than what they were paying before COVID?
Sector-wise, right? Industrial. I guess in my head, I'm thinking where people are paying on an industrial level right now.
Okay.
That's a hot market.
Right.
Office space is certainly kind of let me wait and figure this out.
Right.
Yeah. So I wanted to be clear about that.
No, that's great. And just to reiterate, for anyone who's watching this who has questions about commercial real estate, Rob's contact information is scrolling across the bottom, and he's obviously a very very tuned in to what goes on in this marketplace. And I think his wealth of knowledge is fantastic, which is actually why I invited him to be on here, which must say something about me. But it's a funny thing. I mean, it hasn't been funny, but the nature of the marketplace is so different. Everyone growing up knows about residential properties. They don't necessarily know about commercial properties, and commercial is such a different animal that it takes a real expertise to know the market and be able to sell in this market and buy in this market and deal with the players in this market. And I can only say that I very much appreciate you being willing to come on here. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about in the couple of minutes that we have left?
I mean, I think the biggest takeaway is at the end of the day, everything is specialized, right? So you either have your own office space and you're trying to figure out what to do. Maybe you just sold your building and want to buy something else. So I keep saying case by case, but each thing is different, right? No real estate scenario is typically the same. It's all unique.
Right.
You and I were speaking a little bit earlier, like what's going to happen with all these gyms, right? The sports clubs. So you're a landlord. You have a gym in your building. They haven't paid rent. What do you do? So it's each scenario is a different conversation, and I like talking about them because you have to kind of figure out, and you can give comps, you can give what you see, but you really need to zone in and see where you're at personally.
No question. And I very much appreciate you coming on, and I feel like I've learned a lot about commercial real estate, and I know if I do have any questions going forward, I know who to ask.
Well,
so, thank you very much, Rob. It was great. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, you take care.
Be well.